This is Chapter 4 from Mancu's Principles of Macroeconomics. We're going to be talking about the market forces of supply and demand. And a market is a group of buyers and sellers of a particular product. So our product was a truck, and we had lots. How many people were buyers? Raise your hands. Okay, how many people were sellers? All right, and I said that you represented a point on that line, and so if you connect all the dots, it just represents your behavior, your collective behavior. Buyers, your collective behavior, we call demand. Sellers, your collective behavior, we refer to as supply. How many people didn't get to buy or sell something? We didn't have enough rounds for you to buy or sell yet. Even though you didn't engage in a transaction, you're still part of the market. In this chapter, remember, we are referring to a competitive market. When you take microeconomics, you'll learn about different market structures, like a monopoly or an oligopoly or duopoly. But here we had many buyers and sellers. Now, when I passed out these papers, I tried really hard to be buyer, seller, and split y'all up evenly so that we could simulate a competitive market. And why is that important? Because if you were the only person in the room with a seller piece of paper, with a seller price, what could you have done?
Raise the price.
If everybody's trying to buy from you, what could you have done? Raise the price. Right? You could have just, if they have no other person to buy from than you could have had a price higher than what we had over here. If you were the only buyer, if everybody's trying to sell to you, what could you have done? Okay, Carl would have been really happy. Then he might have actually been able to buy at $4 after a certain point. So if there are a lot of options, lots of buyers, lots of sellers, you can see no one has that kind of control over the price. Okay, so buyers, we're going to talk about you first with demand. Quantity demanded. Now, we ended up with a total of 3 trucks being bought, right? Being bought and sold. So that's just what quantity demanded refers to, the amount of trucks that buyers were willing and able to purchase. The law of demand says that there's a negative relationship between price and quantity. And you'll remember that a negative relationship means that 2 variables are moving in opposite directions. So as one's increasing, the other one's decreasing. And a negative relationship is downward sloping. It looks like that. We talked about that on the first day. And just raise your hand if this applies to you. How many of you buyers were willing and able to buy a truck at $11? 1. 1090. Keep your hands up. 1080. 1070. How many of you were willing and able to buy? 1070, 1060, 1050, 1040, 1030. Okay? So more and more hands are going up. As I'm calling out prices that are going down and the number of hands going up. That represents the law of demand. Couple definitions. A schedule is just the table of data. I'm going to give you a schedule in a minute, and you're going to graph that. But a table is just some data that we have, and we're going to graph it and turn it into. Remember that blue and that red line that I had up there? I got that from the data. Even though we call it a curve, in this line, in this class, it's fine if you just draw a straight line. If you use real data, it might have a little bit of a curve to it, but that's just what we call it. Straight lines are fine in this class. But it's just a graph of your data. So here in the right, you can see your schedule with price and quantity demanded. And for each data point, just like I did on the first day, you're going to graph it over here to create your demand curve. So $3 and none are sold, that's represented by that point. If ice cream cones are $2.50, 2 will be sold, and that's from that point, and then so on and so forth until you have all your dots, and then you can connect all of them to create your demand curve. Now remember, when we're talking about the price, this is the price of one item, the price of one ice cream cone. This is total down here with quantity. We're saying that there's a total of 12, or let's do 10. There's a total of 10 ice cream cones that our buyers are willing and able to purchase, a total of 10 when they are 50 cents a piece. When ice cream cones are 50 cents a piece. So that's how you read this graph. So I could ask you how many times you would go to the movie theater if it was 20 bucks a ticket. Maybe 0 or 1. I might ask you how many times a month you would go if it was $10 a ticket. Maybe more than 0 or 1 if it was $5 a ticket. Okay, maybe a few times. Now if I just did that with one person, I could graph their demand curve, and it looked like y'all were willing to go more if it was cheaper. If I added up all of my answers and went around the room, okay, how many times would y'all go if it's 20? And I went around person by person and recorded that data. I said $10 a ticket, went around person by person and added all of that up, tallied all our responses. And then $5 at each price. If I were to tally up all of our responses, then I would get market demand. That just means we've added up a bunch of responses of individual demand. Your author did that with Catherine and Nicholas, for example. And that's how you can get market demand. We've just added up responses for everybody in the market at each price. So, for example, Catherine was willing and able to buy 4 ice cream cones at $2 a piece. Nicholas was willing and able to buy 3. And so you add that up together, 7. Total demand at $2. That's just what market demand means. Law of demand still applies. It still has that same shape. It's just that we've taken into account more than one person's response, the whole market. On this slide, if you could scratch out shifts in the demand curve, just scratch that out. That actually goes on the next one. Scratch out that heading. We've talked about this maybe not last time, the time before, a change in quantity demanded. Remember that terminology? It means that we're moving along the demand curve. If the price of the product itself is changing, remember I just asked you about movie tickets, going from 20 bucks to 10 bucks. If the price of the movie ticket is changing, y'all said I would go less if it's cheaper. That's a movement that's represented by a movement along the curve. Like moving from point B to point A. And the only thing that changed here is the price of the product itself leading to a change in quantity demanded. But there are some things, remember I said something big causes a change in demand. And make sure you know all of these factors here. These 5 determinants, that's just a fancy word for something that's going to change demand. It's going to shift the whole entire thing. If you have more money, or if you lose your job and you have less money. We'll talk about related products that maybe you can substitute out for tastes. There's a new study, I put it on my blog, that they found that sunscreen reduces wrinkles. And so if people really believe that and decide to wear sunscreen every day, then we'll see sales of sunscreen increase, right? The demand curve is actually going to shift to the right. Expectations of buyers and sellers. So if you expect that something's going to be more expensive tomorrow, maybe the price of your textbook is going to be more expensive tomorrow, you would go ahead and buy it today, or a product that you're needing in the future. Or the number of buyers. If August comes back around, you'll notice that the lines for Cheddars and Nifas and Blizzard Billies is really, really long. It's because of all the Baylor students coming back into town, right? It's not that those meals are getting cheaper, it's just that we have more people back in town. So all of those things can shift demand either to the right or to the left. And this is what I mean with a shift. Price and quantity always go on the vertical and horizontal axes. When we say that there's an increase in demand, okay, so all the Baylor students come back, a lot of people are going out to eat, not because it's cheaper, it's just that we have more people. So at every price, people are wanting to eat out more because we have more people. We're going from the blue line, you know, it has that shape because of the law of demand, to the red line. And it's okay to abbreviate D1 and D2. It's okay to use a different color, use a dotted line for your second one, that's fine. But remember, zero's over here, and when we say that demand has gone up, you really mean that it has increased, right? Don't try to shift demand up like this. Like if this was your original, don't try to shift it up this way. Think of rightward and leftward horizontal shifts. Here's 0. If it's increasing, it's going to move that way. The whole thing's going to shift. A decrease in demand. The whole thing's moving closer to 0.
So basically, the prices are changing at all this, and the majority, the more people.
Yeah, what's changing is the quantity demanded, and it's changing at every price. Yeah. Yeah, when the price changes, like we saw on the 2 slides back, it's just a movement along the curve. And that the only thing, you're right, Carl, the only thing that can cause a movement from here to here is a change in the price of the product itself. This rightward or leftward shift can be caused by any one of those 5 things that we just saw. Income, expectations, taste, things like that. Okay, we're going to talk about determinant 1 in more detail. If you have more money, you tend to buy more of certain things. Like flat screen TVs and nice sports cars. Most items are normal goods. Okay, so what do we mean here? If we had the demand curve up here for a flat screen TV, what's going to change on it? If people have more money, it's going to shift to the right. Good. Hey, there are some things that we actually buy less of if you have more money. Can y'all think of an example? If you won the lottery, what are some things you would buy less of?
Ramen.
Ramen noodles. Yeah, maybe less public transportation, used clothing. Economics textbooks always use ground beef as an example of an inferior good because what kind of meats are you going to be eating when you have more money? Steak. Okay, steak. That's their example for a normal good. The second determinant, prices of related goods. Okay, so remember, know what normal and inferior goods, and that deals with income. We have this. The second determinant we'll talk about in more detail too. And let me see which slides did I give you all. Yeah, I changed if you want to change the wording. I know it says when it's talking about a fall in the price, just change when an increase in the price of one good increases. It's true the other way too. I just think it's easier to explain it this way. So if one item gets super expensive, enough to change people's behavior, they're fed up and they don't want to pay for it, increases demand for another product, we call those substitutes. And my example was Coke and Pepsi. So if Coke gets super expensive, $5 a can, I think some of us would say, well, no thank you, we're going to switch to Dr. Pepper or Pepsi or some other product. There's someone in the other class said Gatorade and Powerade. That's another example. All right, complements are the opposite. An increase in the price of one decreases the demand for another. Can y'all think of an example? These are things that we usually consume together. Peanut butter and jelly. Peanut butter and jelly. Yep. ice cream and ice cream cones, salad and salad dressing, chips and dip. So if chips get super expensive for whatever reason, and people usually consume chips and dip together, if people are not buying chips because they're too expensive, what's going to happen to the demand for dip? Okay, it's going to go down or decrease, and that means shifting to the left on a graph. Good. All right. Let's take 5 right here, and then we'll talk about supply when we get back. Let's take a break.